Thank you. Thank you. So for our final session, we have Dr. Jill Trepanier. I hope I said that right. Yes. Cool. Here to talk about marketing your science. Brief introduction, Dr. Jill Trepanier is a hurricane climatologist and geographer in the Geography and Anthropology Department at Louisiana State University. Her expertise is in the statistical calculation of extreme hurricane risk in different locales around the North Atlantic Ocean. She teaches coursework in meteorology, tropical atmospheres, and hurricane climatology. And each hurricane season, she's frequently asked to participate in media interviews and write opinion education articles. During the rest of the year, she is often found in the classroom at LSU or in the field with K-12 students installing weather stations. Without further ado, thank you.
Okay, yes, is it working? All right, I moved, so this works better. Hi, everyone. My name is Jill Trepanier, and I am hopefully going to give you a presentation today on how to properly market your science. Now, I have a load of disclaimers, which is not something, there it goes, that I would often do. I'm gonna try it one time. I'm gonna mess with this and not drive you crazy, and we'll see if it gets any better, okay? And if not, I'm just gonna shut her down and grab a microphone or just shout, because usually I teach 400 students at a time and I don't need a mic. So it's okay if that has to happen. Now, I want to give you kind of a little bit of a background to this talk because Rachel and the South Central CASC reached out to me and said, can you please give a presentation on marketing your science? And I said, I don't think I do that, right? Like, I don't know that I do that properly. I don't know that I know what that means. And we talked a little bit more about it. And so to the credit of the organizers, they told me exactly what they wanted. They said, I want you to present to us about how you communicate with resource managers, policymakers. How do you actually take the information that you learn or that you create, if we want to do it that way, right? But that we think of new things and actually bring it back to somebody that can utilize it, okay? So I don't know that I fully know how to do that. I'm going to be just totally honest. And the thing today that makes me the most nervous is I had never given a presentation like this before in my life. I could talk to you all day long about rainfall, hurricanes, extreme weather behavior, climate change, but this is like a horse of a different color, right? So I'm trying to figure out how do I build this presentation, okay? So I find myself with some unexpected airplane time last week. And when you find yourself in an airport on layovers and an airplane where you don't have my very wonderful students knocking on my door and asking me for things, suddenly I'm like, I can think. What a luxury that is, right? Because normally I don't really get rushed to make decisions and then I have to do, right? So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking and I'm like, all right, I think I know how I'm going to do this. Is a scientist a salesperson? Because when I was thinking about marketing my science, I thought, what does that mean? Does that mean that I'm trying to make something look shiny and pretty so that they buy it? Or is it that I'm trying to better articulate myself to somebody so that they buy it? But every time I was describing it to myself, it ended the same way, so that they buy it. And I'm like, am I a salesperson? I feel like I might be. I'm inadvertently a salesperson. Certainly, I didn't know that this was what I was going to be doing as I would build my career, that I did have to, yes, inform myself and articulate scientific information, but I can do that to a class room full of college students. But can I do that to somebody who's not there with the intent to actually learn it from me? That's an entirely different person, right? So my goal today is to try to describe to you the context of this question. And we can make our decision at the end if we do think that us as scientists are salespeople. But I think that part of this presentation is really about how to properly communicate with a person. Not a group of people, maybe that's part of it, but just a human, another human that I got to know, and am I going to actually get to talk to them? So if I want you all to have a little bit of faith in me, a little bit of trust in the person you're standing in front of, you know who you're talking to. And I think this concept translates to every conversation that you might have with a student, a stakeholder, a politician. They got to know who you are, because otherwise you're just that academic standing at the front of the room telling somebody probably a little bit of what they already know, and then you're also telling them how they have to fix things. That's a little bit of a daunting task to hear from someone, right? So me, a little bit about me. All right, so a little bit about me. My science is, as was described by Brennan, I'm a hurricane climatologist, I'm a geographer. All three of my degrees are in geography, and my students get very used to hearing me say the phrase geography matters. And in my preparation, in my anxiety-ridden preparation of this presentation, I was nervous I was going to present the wrong thing. But today, listening to the fabulous presenters throughout the day, I'm quite confident that I'm going to summarize everything, which is nice when that happens. So this is the stuff that I study in the simplest form. But I am a geographer and I like to think about tropical cyclone development and how some storms might have really heavy rainfall. That's number one, right? And some storms might have really impressive wind speed. Some might have storm surge. Some will have a combination of one or two, or three of these. Some will have all of them. And then you lead to this. But that risk is not the same everywhere, right? It's different depending on their historical experiences, the infrastructure that they have in place to deal with these problems, right? So a Cat 1 in Miami and a Cat 1 in New Jersey are not necessarily the same beast. So that's what I do. I try to understand how this risk changes depending on where we are and how it might adapt or change in a changing climate, right? And then the other stuff that I do is I hang out with kids. I like kids. I have two of my own. They're 6 and 9, and I love them the most. I wouldn't want to hang out with kids all the time, every day. If I did, I would have become a K-12 teacher. But I do like to go in and showcase to them some new ways of thinking about the world. So this is the Sea Grant project that's completed. It's finished. This guy here is Dr. Tucker. He's the one who came up with this idea. So for the record, students, you guys are pretty fantastic. You come up with great ideas, you implement those ideas. You just need somebody like me to helm the ship, as it were, right? Is that the right word? Captain the whatever. Captain the whatever. That's the thing. Thank you, Adrian. Yes. All right. So this is a tree core. Full disclosure, I know very little about trees, save for the fact that they need good soil and sunlight and water and all that. But those are tree cores. And if I were to tell you, if I were to say, now this is an interactive presentation. Do we know what that is? Yeah. But I do believe it's like, where we interact with one another. So we're going to use that to our advantage. If I were to cut down a tree right now and say, go ahead, count the rings, what would it tell me? How old the tree is? You do not need to be a dendrochronologist to know that answer, right? And every kid knows that answer too. If you cut down a tree and I say, hey kid, go count those rings. Tell me how old the tree is. And they're excited because suddenly they're seeing an insight into the past, right? They weren't there when the tree started growing. They know this, but yet they feel confident that they can go back in time in a tree. If they can go back in time in a tree, maybe I can convince them that we can go back even further in other stuff, like sediment, ice cores, coral reefs, right? And if I can go back in time there, now I can tell them how I reconstruct climate. Because even all is a tree, and suddenly they can start to build this concept together. And then if you actually get them out there coring the tree themselves, now they're invested, right? Because they're like, ooh, that was fun. I got to get dirty. I get to go home and tell my mom about outside, right? Yeah. There's Louisiana noises. They're quick. Okay, so yes, right. We can build this concept of actual climate science in an environmental science classroom. So in Louisiana, environmental science is not a mandatory high school class. You can take it by opting in. Say you really like the environment. You're a planet Earth lover. And you're like, I'm going to take a class. You can, but you don't have to. I might argue that a student living in the state of Louisiana needs to take environmental science because they are dramatically impacted by the world that they live in and they know it. You don't have to do a lot to try to convince them that that thunderstorm that flooded their streets, that their backpack fell in and all their homework got wrecked and their computer and their teachers are mad. They get it. But you got to actually give them the opportunity to get there, right? So that's what this project is all about. And if you really want to know at the end of this, I got a whole bunch of research slides because it's like I can't have a presentation without research slides. That's what I do. But one of those projects is capitalizing on the relationships that were made. Okay, so now you know a little bit about me. I like bad weather. I like to describe how bad weather operates and then try to think about it in a changing environment and then actually relate it to the kids who live in the place where it's happening. Okay? Okay. Interactive time. Why do we market our science? Now, I can do the thing where I just stare at you awkwardly until you actually answer the question. I've got a slide coming that's got bullets, right? But you know the answer to this question. Why do we market it? Go ahead, shout her out, raise your hand, somebody. We want money, that's on my list, 100%. Now, that money is related to two things. One of it is I need actual funds to execute the project, to implement the solution. Okay, I also need to get paid because I don't want to work for free. And you might argue that that's an economic benefit too. My kids certainly like it when I make more money, you know? So that's a benefit. Okay, what else? Have an impact. They have an impact, right? To actually try to take that information that you've learned, that you've created, and then help someone else. Actually, a true impact on that person's life. What else? Yeah.
We want people to believe us when we say things.
We want people to believe us when we say things. That's so real, right? We want someone that when we start speaking, that they don't immediately shut down. Because now I got another academic looking at me telling me more things about what it is that's wrong with my life, right? We don't want that. We want them to actually believe what we say. So we have to properly market that. What else? Yeah. To share it against us, intellectual, right? That idea that we're going to build on the information that was already there before and then make it better so that we can understand. Yeah. Because that's how we get to know humans. That is my favorite answer. No, I like everybody. But that is a good one. All right, so now to move forward, if you know somebody does, that's why you got the job you got. Right, that's why you were hired. That's why you're going to school. That's why you're doing what you're doing. Somebody out there wants to hear from you. You know it, but trying to figure out the path to get there, that's tough. So I have my list. We got them all, I think, generally speaking, right? To provide a solution to better protect someone, to help someone better understand. Now, this morning, like I said, a lot of the stuff that's in here was talked about today, which is really useful to me because it's kind of like a summary almost of the, I won't use the phrase best practices because I just learned that I shouldn't. But this idea of the uniquely you practice that makes it beneficial there. Might not be there, that's fine, I'll worry about that one next time. But this uniquely beneficial practice for that place, right? To give money. Yeah, absolutely. All right, and to teach someone. This is the other part, right? These are not mutually exclusive, right? Some of these things overlap with one another. And maybe this idea of teaching someone is also to help somebody better understand. Yeah.
So Jill, how does this then, but does this also have to feed back to you? Because all these are to Al, but what happens to you in doing this?
This is such a great question. Because I think often some of our biggest limitations to the successful marketing of science is that we focus a little bit too much on ourselves. I promise that by executing these, you will be benefited over time. You're going to make new connections. That means you're going to find more avenues for funding. You're going to find more humans to work with. New problems will be presented. Before you know it, you built a whole career. So you don't have to go, I think, searching for this endeavor of what is this better for me, but also that's number 4. Right? Because some of it is, I'm going to write a grant proposal, but I'm going to factor in myself some salaries, some student funding, so that way I can see them grow. I can see my bank account grow. I can see my career repertoire grow, right? All of that is inherent in these different reasons, okay? So marketing your science or making your science marketable, okay? Okay, I didn't say this. I have never before in my life used so many stock images from Microsoft Office. So I realized something while doing this. I have pictures of myself in the field. I've got pictures of myself with students at presentation, right? Like me taking a picture of them standing in front of their poster. I have absolutely no pictures of me actually marketing science. I don't know what that would look like. Is that me and another person sitting at a table and somebody's like, screenshot, like selfie with you guys, marketing science, making progress. So I don't have pictures of that. So these are people you do not know. These are people that are inherent in Microsoft PowerPoint's system. So don't be surprised when you don't see people you know. But I feel like, I don't know who that is, but I do know that we experience this world a lot, where there's one of us standing in front of a group of humans. Maybe we're at a table with a group of humans, But we got people who are maybe intensely listening to us. So how do we go from this, where suddenly they're like, yeah, you're doing amazing, I know exactly what you're talking about. Give you money and make solutions happen. And absolutely, no real idea. Okay, but I will showcase to you the ways that I try to incorporate it into my world. Okay, now. I don't want to hit it too much. All right, now I have a bit of a disclaimer here. So all together now, this is a picture of what kind of atmospheric system? Hurricane, right? Fine, it's a bad weather event. Part of my point though, right? I can walk into a room with or without an umbrella dress on, and I can say, hey, this is what I study. And I try to show them a picture. And they're like, oh, hurricanes, okay. My job is easier because of the topic that I have. There is without a question that that is true. The media drives people's desire to understand hurricanes. Why? Because we like disasters. We don't like to be in them, but we like to watch them. Why? I don't know. Ask a sociologist or a psychologist. As I was saying, someone else, I love humans. I don't like to study them because we do weird things that I don't understand, not physics. We don't abide by laws of physics like that does. So the point of this though is before you start attempting to market whatever it is that you're talking about, you have to establish a foundation. That person, if I put a picture up here of like an amoeba, I don't even know what that would look like because I don't do that. All right. So that's kind of my point as well. Right? I can show a variety of different things that you all do that's incredible, right? It could be a specific fish species. It could be a particular agricultural crop. It could be an organism in peril because the river system is too dry, right? It could be any of these things. And if you threw it up there and said, hey, what is this? You're not going to get the same response I got. So I say this because my job to market science is easier simply because the topic that I happened to choose that I'm very interested in, and there's reasons why I chose it. But keep that in mind before you start launching into what the problem is and what it is that you're, trying to solve. Make sure they know what the heck you're talking about before you do that, because it helps to establish that rapport of open communication that you want to make sure they're on board from the very beginning until you get to the end and actually expect them to shake your hand, give you nuts, give you money, and try to make your world a little bit better, right? Okay. This one's my favorite. Okay, so how does my process work? Now, for those of you who are in here that actually like to talk to people, you're like, okay, but the first process actually has to come from you wanting to communicate with people, not doing it because you know it's part of your job and you know that it's supposed to happen and it's the only way you can effectively get money. That's sweet, all that's good. But because you actually want to help solve that problem for that human. That's a very different perspective, right? Again, it's kind of leading with them, not with you. And I think you will get the benefit if you lead with them. But having that desire to actually want to tell somebody what's going on, not just because you can, that's a different thing, but because they need you and you need them. It's called a mutually beneficial relationship. Organisms do it in the environment all the time. We have a tendency to do it in a different way. We can't do a parasite, where we're like, I'm gonna just take that information from you and then utilize it in my own world. We don't want to do it that way. I don't think that's working, and we know that. And so part of it is trying to move more toward that mutualistic perspective. Now, I truly do let my students lead the way on this. I've been a professor for 10 years, and before that, I was in graduate school for 5 years, and I taught from a master's student on. I've been teaching students for a really long time. And every semester, I teach 400 students in a natural science general education course called Physical Geography of the Atmosphere. And they are taking it because they are not geography majors. They are taking it because they think it is the easiest natural science gen ed they can take. And I'm cool with that because, full disclosure, I took it for exactly the same reason when I was a junior in college. I was like, ooh, yeah, bio, nah, chemistry, I'm gonna just go do this, geography, okay. And then somebody was up there and he's talking about clouds and hurricanes. And I'm like, wait a minute. Are you telling me that I can actually study meteorology type ideas, concepts, phenomenon, and not do it from a thermodynamics perspective? I'm sold. How do I do this? Is this about maps? Is this about patterns? Is this about how things change across space? I'm sold from that perspective. And the reason, just to give you a tiny little piece of who I am, my mom moved to the island of Jamaica when I was a freshman in college, and I thought it was very fascinating that the people who live in Jamaica receive hurricanes almost annually, but they are expecting them. They are living with them as part of their normal environmental consequence of being where they are, and they are good with it. We have a very different perspective here in the United States. We're like, okay, I guess it's happening. How do we stop it? How do we block it? How do we shoot nukes at it to make it go away? Whatever it is, people with really big baby guns talk about. Okay, all these different ways of thinking about changing what's happening, as opposed to adapting to live with what's happening. It's a very different perspective. So I say all of that because over the 10 years that I've been at LSU, I've taught well over 12,000 of LSU students. And they don't want to hear from me. They don't. They do not want to learn from me. They do not want me to try to convince them that they like science. But it's my challenge to do that. Because if I want them to actually pull an A, which is what they want, they're going to have to listen to me. And I've got to get them to be convinced that they want to listen to me. That's not an easy thing to do, okay? So the second thing is you need to recognize, and this is what students have taught me the most, is that there is more than one path to get to the same result. We know this to be true, but we often resist it, right? We often say, I know what my path looks like. So this is what I want your path to look like. So we try to, mold it for someone. But the reality is you can go from this extremely confused individual, and whether their line is like this, see, I told you I'd walk, right? Whether it's like that, or it's straight, or it's up and down and back around again, it really doesn't matter, as long as you can get them to the end result. And so a student taught me that. Students taught me that. Because I have lots that come in and say, I don't want to do this. They've been either told somewhere along the line they don't like science. They've been told that they're not good at it, that they'll never be good at it. My name is Jill, and I got told that virtually every day of my life, all of high school, that you will never be good at math. You will never be good at science. Go do something else. So I did. That's why I changed my major 5 times as an undergraduate student, because I tried to do something else. But I'm a scientist. So I competed against that mentality in my own head, and I figured out how to get over it. Just like I figure out how to get through to that student who is the toughest crowd I've ever had. You might think that as a climate person, my toughest crowd is a Louisiana Republican. It is not. That crowd is easy for me because they already see it happening. I don't need to convince them that their world is changing. They are watching it change. Now, I don't get into the argument about who's making the change. I don't do that. Because I deal with what happens when it's changing. It's already changing, so what are we dealing with afterward? Now, I'm not the one that's looking at carbon dioxide emissions and trying to reduce those. That's a different thing, but it is all kind of boils down to what Ethan was saying earlier. It's about that cell. It's about trying to monitor the ecosystem service that exists around you and then explain that to somebody from their perspective, right? Okay. All people can learn, assuming that we have reasonable cognitive function, all humans can learn. But I guarantee you, you've met a human in your life that will try to push that envelope just a little bit. And you're like, are you sure? Are you sure, Jill, that all humans can learn? Yes, I'm quite positive, because I get some of the toughest crowds out there. I get the kid that's parents forced them into college, that's just there because they said they had to be an LSU student. And the thing is, every student on LSU campus has to take a dual sequence natural science gen ed, every single one. So how many of you think that they come to me and it's because they think it's the easiest class? My average right now is a low C. It is not an easy class, and that's with some curves, okay? So it's not an easy class, but the idea is that they will start to try to incorporate this environmental information about the world that they live in to their economy major, or maybe their, architecture, an architect. I do that every time, an architecturist. That's what my mom wants to say. An architect, maybe they're that student and they're like, how do I build a house in Ecuador versus building a house in Kansas? The environment matters, right? You might imagine that. So I'm trying to convince them to see a need in what it is that I'm saying, right? If a person understands what you're talking about, they will come to a similar conclusion, and then they're going to be more likely to actually buy what you're selling, because you are the one that's convincing them to come to their own conclusion by providing them information they didn't have before, right? It's not about telling somebody how they should feel. You ever have somebody do that? Like when say you're having a bad day, you go home and you're freaking out. Somebody's like, can you just calm down? It doesn't work, does it? It doesn't work when somebody tells you how to feel. You gotta let them feel it out on their own. And you're just there as the kind of, like I said, the captain of the ship, right? You're just trying to help navigate them to steer away from the icebergs and toward the information that will help them, okay? Now, transferring this idea from helping my student out to actually a stakeholder that might be interested in trying to take out resources and put it towards them, okay? So, a theme from all of today's presentation. The people that you all speak to, those that were speaking today, did you have to tell them the problem that they have? No, right? They know. They might not know exactly what's causing said problem, but they know they have a problem. That's why you are in the same room together. They don't need you to do that for them. They need you to provide solutions and say, hey, how can I help you do this? And this is why, Sarah Franzen was talking earlier, that project that just got started. I'm the climatologist on that project, and I am so excited about how the fact I have no idea what's going to happen. And that's a scary thing, but a very exciting thing, because I know that when I show up and I'm the person who understands the data, knows how to visually graph the data, they're going to tell me what they want, and then I can give it to them. And that's super cool, because now it's not me leading the way to me. It's them. I'm just the one who's got the tools. Sounds good. I went to training. I did that. I went to school for that. That was the point of why I'm doing what I'm doing. But I don't need to identify the problems. They can do that. And then you lead with the solutions. Now, with the student, it's about that great every time. They don't care what I'm selling as long as I can get them the A. So then they come to my office and they say, so how do I get that A? Not just tell them that I'm going to give them an A. Shocker, right? Spoiler alert. I give them a whole list of work to do. But I don't say, hey, look, you're failing my class, and I need you to do this, 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 and this in order to get an A. Immediate on the defense, right? They know they're failing, trust me. That's why they're there. So what I say is, instead of the way you were studying before, that led you to where you were before, let's change the approach. Tell me how you were studying before so that I can redirect you. I can help you navigate this properly. And suddenly, they're walking away from my office with a smile on their face and a list of work to do. That's weird. That's a weird combination of things. Most students are angry when you tell them they have extra work to do. Not in this case, because they want that grade, right? They are seeing what the selling point is, and I just told them the path to get there. That's the solution. But they know what the problem is. They see what they want. How do I get them there, right? So for a stakeholder, there's a whole bunch of stuff you're reading. Take a second. This is also the theme of today, right? We don't talk about good things. We don't do it. We don't say all of the things in your environment are functioning perfectly. Good job. I've literally never said that to anyone ever in the United States of America, right? We don't talk about good things. We talk about problems. We talk about how we screw things up and now we have to fix them. So it's about solving the problem and making it known how what your solution is going to help them. And to get back to John's point, right? This will help you, but you don't need to lead with that. It can be something in the back of your mind, like, okay, yeah, when I do this, I am going to get this. Cool, right? But you don't need, that doesn't need to be part of your selling argument, right? If you thought about it, if you think about it, right? Say you have to fill up gas in the car, and somebody comes up to you and they're like, hey, put that gas in your car because it's going to also put $10 in my bank account. you would look at them and be like, break away from me. I don't want you to take my $10 away. That's insane. But you know it's happening, but it's not in your face. And until it is in your face, that's when the rest of the US and social media erupts, because they're like, why are you making me spend so much money? They've been doing that forever. It just wasn't so apparent to you. Right? So you don't need to lead with that. That's going to drive them away. Now, these pictures, you might be like, what the heck are all these pictures? I have an undergraduate student right now who is from the New Orleans area. Last year we had an EF3 tornado. And a couple of years before that, we had another EF3 tornado. And we have no real tornado warning mitigation system here in Louisiana because we are familiar with the coastal stuff. Not so much the sheared environment, cold meets warm, big EF3 tornadoes, right? So she's doing this project looking at tornado data, where they have happened, the geography of them, and then where sirens are. And we are having a heck of a time finding a data set for where sirens are. My guess is because there are none. And so we're going to have a problem with that. But now imagine I go into a stakeholder's office and I'm like, listen, we are having all the tornadoes. You have never put up a siren. You are responsible for the reason people don't know what's going on. What do you think is going to happen? They are going to tell me to leave their office because I have come in aggressively and I'm not helping anything. They already know all of that. But if I come in and I say, hey, I noticed that we've had more tornadoes recently and we need some sirens in these specific places because it will assist in the evacuation and the protection of X number of humans, which will ultimately save us money down the road because those humans won't end up in a hospital. And then suddenly they're like, okay, where should we put sirens? Now, that's an idealized situation, I recognize. But that's assuming that the person actually has money to spend and wants to spend it. But this mentality of how you go into the conversation changes everything with the communication that takes place afterwards. Okay, so one of the places, as my introduction thing said, and for the record, I wrote that, so that's the reason I put that in there was because of this connection to this. When I was a second year professor here at LSU, I've been here for 10 years. Okay, my second year, I got a phone call from my advisor at Florida State. His name is James Elser, in the geography program, and he says, hey, I got a media request and I don't want to do it. It's at 5 a.m. on the Eastern Seaboard for a Canadian Broadcasting Corporation radio show. And they want to do 10 back to back for 30 seconds each, starting at 5 a.m. I did not want to do that, but I said, sure, I'll do it. Because I was new, I was like, well, it's Canada. I kind of sound like them anyway. It'll work out fine. And I'm like, okay, well, I've never even done this before, so let's give it a shot, right? Fast forward 6 years, and I've got the New York Times calling me and saying, hey, can you write an op-ed for Hurricane 2020 season? I have absolutely no idea how those things got connected, but in between, I did many radio shows, many TV spots, many of these things, just because they call. And they're like, hey, can you tell us about what's going on? They don't ask me what the problems are. They just say, can you explain? I don't understand. I just want information. I'm like, okay, sure, I can provide that. Now, I have this, make sure you're on organizations lists of experts, okay? Because I'm on the American Geophysical Union's hurricane expert list. I'm on the AAAS hurricane expert list. I'm on a few of them. I'm also on Little. I would encourage you to branch out to who knows your name. It doesn't need to be much, just your name and the thing that you do. Keep it simple. Keep it foundational, right? If I say I study the probability theory of how tropical cyclones impact various humans across the planet, I'm done. I got bored when I said that, and I do it. Okay, so you gotta make sure that you're leading with that individual term, that foundation. It bases who you are, so that people can reach out to you when they need your help. Now, I bring this one up in particular because don't point out all the problems. It doesn't do you any good. So in this particular paper, imagine if you listen to scientists before the hurricane, the immediate title, you might be like, ooh, this is a paper about how they don't, right? And they don't listen to scientists, and that's why things go bad. This is actually an op-ed about the opposite. It's about how Governor Bell Edwards listened to the National Hurricane Center when Hurricane Laura started to form 5 days out and said they're gonna make landfall in Southwest Louisiana, evacuate. 5 days. You guys put 5 days of trust in that weather app on your phone? Probably not. But our hurricane tracking metrics are pretty good. And so they were like, well, it's gonna make landfall, your models agree, 5 days out. Governor Bell Edwards evacuated 2.5 million people. And near Cat 5, let's be real, Cat 5 for sure, gusting level, made landfall in Southwest Louisiana, and 1 fisherman died because he was on his boat and should not have been out there. That's not to minimize the disaster that was, that we lost that person's life. They were in a very unsafe spot. But then nobody else died. The people who died afterward, related to generator exhaust problems. But a Cat 5 hit the Louisiana coast and nobody died? That is a massive success of where politicians listen to scientists and then humans listen to the politician. It can happen. It does happen. But we actually have to open up the line of communication between those humans in order to make it happen. Okay. Now, the elevator pitch. At this point, I don't remember who said it. Somebody said it, maybe Ethan, maybe somebody else. The elevator pitch. Now, you guys know what this is? Yes, because most graduate students have been trained, and maybe you're new and maybe you don't know yet, but it is what can you study, or say what you study in less than 30 seconds. Now, the first thing that you've been trained to do is get ready for your defense. Now, I know many of us are well beyond the defense, right? But I might argue that every single time I'm standing up here in a group, I am selling something that somebody needs to believe. So I'm arguably defending every single time I open my mouth. But I might not seem that way. This idea of the 30 seconds or less, it shouldn't be just one elevator pitch. You should have multiple, depending on the humans that you're speaking to. That community that you're involved with, is it kids? Is it academics? Is it a resource manager? Is it somebody in between? And you shouldn't be waiting to figure out what you're going to say until you get there. You should be thinking, like somebody earlier was like, who's in my audience? I think that was Julie. I was like, who's in my audience so I know who I'm speaking to? That matters because it's going to help you reduce jargon when necessary. Make sure that we are properly describing acronyms because acronyms in the climate world are ridiculous. They are everywhere and not ceasing at any point. So we need to be cautious. So in fact, this is what I would say. I study where and why bad weather happens, especially hurricanes. I like to think about bad weather changes in a world where glaciers are growing and glaciers are melting. It's the simplest way to say climate change without saying climate change, in my opinion. Okay? In an actual stakeholder, I'm going to provide localized risk of extreme weather. So localized is a very important word for them. They don't care about what's happening in Maine if I'm talking to somebody in Southwest Louisiana. Right? So they don't care about global. They want to know local risk for them related to your variable of interest. And then I can think about things like mapping or statistics to try to help you understand. You see the word help show up fairly often. Okay. And then finally, what about an academic? I'm going to use all sorts of ridiculous words that make you sound smart because we're arrogant. That's what we like to do. And I can't even stress to you how many times I've watched an academic bully another academic. Why do we do that? I really don't know. I don't get it. I am fully not a proponent of it. Just because somebody doesn't understand what you're saying does not make them incapable. It does not make you better. It simply means that there is a difference in your understanding of that particular concept. I guarantee you they know some stuff better than you do. So it's about recognizing your own limitations and the limitations of the person around you. And it is not related to you being better than them. It is much more about just a gap of understanding, which you can solve by actually being open to solve. So the last, when did I start? 3:15. Oh, you're good. You talked to really cool. How did you do so fast? Okay. Probably not for you guys, since you were just the other day, or you lady with the pink dress on. Okay, so don't do this. Do not tell somebody how many problems they have. They already know. I promise. Okay, tell somebody the ideas you have to solve those problems. Conversate with them, discuss. They probably have really good ideas to help make your solution even better than what it would have been without them. Okay, don't talk extremely quickly. I should have talked faster. Is that possible? Yes, and believe it or not, my students know I can talk really ask if I need to, but do pace yourself and be clear. You are the expert. They are not the expert. That's part of the training and job you chose. That doesn't matter to them. They don't need to know all the details. You do. They just need to know the main points and why it's important for them. And then finally, don't tell somebody they're wrong. The first thing that's going to do is elicit defensive behavior. And now you've lost them. You could have a golden shiny egg that solves all their problems, but now they're pissed. And you just put them there. And now you're like, please now listen to me. I'm going to help. Again, when you're happy about something and then somebody offers you help, you're not going to take it from the person who made you unhappy. Compassion goes an exceptionally far way when somebody is having a difficulty accepting what you're saying, understanding what you're saying, and actually implementing the solutions that you provided to them. You don't need to sugarcoat it. You just also don't need to be a jerk. You don't need to be abrasive. You don't need to bully. You don't need to make it seem like you're better than them. You didn't do any of that. You just need to provide help when help is asked for. Okay, so that's it. I didn't leave you any time for this Q&A, but I meant to, so that counts for something, right? This is more I like to get a sweet video or a sweet picture, whatever animation, because it's when the storm was about to make landfall, so you see that satellite shift from day to night, not in school. So that's it. Thank you very much for listening. I hope it was helpful.
We have a couple quick questions here, Barry. Thanks. All right.
While you're running over there, Vinny, earlier, he's like, you're gonna talk for like the whole 45 minutes? I don't know, I'll finish in like 25, 30. He should have known, he should have been like, Jill, come on. Yeah.
So when I had, great talk, great comments here. When I bring up similar things within my department, you know, in terms of communicating and media, but also other things, I told them there's only certain people that should, other people shouldn't. What's your advice about, you know, should every scientist and every academic, should all of them be communicating with the public, whether it be a media source or?
I mean, thanks, Jason. I think that's a great question. I mean, in an ideal world, sure, right? Because the idea is when you're asking a scientific question, it should be with the intent of a broader impact. There should be somebody who's going to benefit from that research. That's why we're doing it. Not everybody wants to talk to people. So it kind of gets back to my first point. If you're somebody who is exceptionally socially anxious and you cannot go into a room and try to dictate what's going on, that's real. And I wouldn't want to put you in that position that makes you so exceptionally uncomfortable. I would encourage that individual to have a small network of humans that they could then bring onto their team. Maybe one of those humans is better at that first one. Better meaning they just want to. They want to be the one that talks because that matters. And I wouldn't want to put somebody in a situation that they're uncomfortable. That stakeholder's going to know right out of the gate that that person doesn't want to be there. So I think it's best to find the person that helps you articulate and communicate if you yourself don't want to be the one to do it. And that's really helpful with these multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary teams, right? Because we are all good at some things. We are all bad at others. So if we can find a way to build that network to where the strengths and the weaknesses kind of balance each other out, then we're working in the right direction, I think.
Fantastic, yeah, as your colleague and paper, very inspiring, yeah. I have a question about media interviews. I'm curious to learn how you address journalists' questions and how you approach them, because I have some positive stories, but also negative stories, such as you didn't say tons of sentences,
Yes.
but journalists manipulate them and use their own words, especially when it concerns human cost.
Okay, so yeah.
Change. How do you?
So thank you, one thing. I appreciate that question. So a couple of things. Number one, when I'm doing an interview, I will get very, 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 very nervous right beforehand, because if somebody tells me that I'm about to be on television, I get really nervous. Okay, and so I will pretend I'm talking to a student every time. Because a student is a safe place for me, because I've done it enough, right? I'm like, I deal with students all the time. I love talking to students. They're interested. They want to know. I'm not talking about those freshmen. I'm talking about my upper level seniors in geography, my graduate students, right? Those that want to learn from me. I think that I'm talking to one of them. It's a simple question that a student is asking, I can answer it. Now, two things to say about that last bit. You might imagine that people try to lead me to climate change pretty quickly. They're like, that really bad hurricane, that was from a changing climate, right? And I'm like, no, never. It will no, not one storm. That's not real. That's not how we think about it. Now, I don't say it that way because that's abrasive. I'm like, no, that's wrong. As I just told you not to tell somebody that's wrong. I don't say it that way. I would say, well, I would change how we're thinking about it. And instead of thinking about an individual event, I try to think about seasons. How are the seasons changing over time? And then we can start talking about things like rapid intensifying hurricanes or new geographic places that never saw them before. And inherently, part of that is a changing climate. But I don't ever say hurricanes are changing because of a changing climate. It's a dangerous game to be in. And it deludes the issue because, as we said before, you say climate change and some people will immediately shut off. But I can describe the same concepts without using the jargon or the politicized terms, so it doesn't drive them to the same place. And the second part of that is, if they say they're gonna quote me, I want to see the quote first, every time, because I will misspeak. Sometimes it's not just about them, it's about me. I talk fast, I get excited about stuff. Sometimes I'll call hurricanes she when they're named after a female or named after a woman's name or whatever. You're not supposed to do that. Elsewhere used to yell at me all the time for that. It's not a human. Stop giving she or he, fair. So I've used that in interviews and then I'm like, stop, hard stop. I can't do that because Elsewhere will see it and yell at me. My advisor, right? They have this weird control over you long after. But so those are kind of my three big things. One, treat it as though you're talking to a student or a friend that's asking you a question. Keep it light in the sense of your own investment in that conversation. It should be that you are invested, but not that you are so nervous that you end up getting all academic on it. Because that's what I'll do. If I get nervous, I fall back to my training, which is use really big words. It confuses people. They stop asking me questions. Okay. Right. But I'm not in that game anymore. I'm supposed to be doing the other thing where I'm trying to take the confusion out of the equation. Now it's a complex problem. Doesn't mean it has to stay complicated when you're talking about it to somebody who doesn't need to know all the complexity. And then make sure you see the quote.
And it's actually great with this picture of the hurricane is up. So you said it's easier for you to talk about what you study because anybody can look at that picture and understand what it is. For those of us that are studying things that are maybe a little less widely known, which I think is probably a lot of people in that room. And this is something I struggle with personally. How do you balance between trying to be like really true to what you are studying while also making it accessible? Like, where do you draw that line?
That's a really good question and difficult to answer because I think it's very dependent on the person that I'm speaking to, right? Because part of it is, if it's a person who say it's an 8th grade classroom and they're like, I live in Louisiana, so I know what a hurricane is. I can kind of jump into a level where I'm like, well, we know they happen in summer, we know, and so I can describe some of the conditions without really having to give much of the background, right? They already know some of my science. Now, if I'm talking to somebody in Canada, for example, and because for the record, I have no idea why they cared about that particular event because it wasn't going to go all the way up to Canada, but they were interested because, as I said, this is the topic people want to talk about, even if it's not affecting them directly. Okay, so in that instance, I start very simple and I'm just like textbook definition. A hurricane is a low pressure system, meaning bad weather, instability. I don't even use that word. I'll say something like a hurricane is a thunderstorm that forms in a tropical ocean. And then it starts to get organized. And when it gets organized, it packs a larger punch, right? So I try to bring it back down to that level. The reality is inside your own head, you will argue with yourself. You will say that was too simple. You made that too simple. But they're like, that was fascinating. And they're like, oh my gosh, that was so simple. I didn't give you all the things, they don't need it. You do. You feel like you do. That's real. That's fair. And your academic cohort, they need it too, because that's why we're the intellectual merit to advance the science. They're not worried about it like you are. They want to know why it matters to them. So my advice is to whatever it is, that the topic that you have, figure out a way to make it, as Sarah Franson said earlier, a kitchen table conversation. Right? So I was just teaching students about kelp. The ocean chapter, it's very small little piece. And I was teaching about kelp, and they were like, you big blanket stares. And I'm like, okay, where is kelp? You eat it. You ate it today. And they're like, what? And I'm like, well, you're not supposed to eat it. You're supposed to spit it out. Kelp is in toothpaste. It's also in ice cream. It's also in a variety of other things. Make it about them. And suddenly they'll be a little bit more invested. And then you can get through that door just a little easier, I find. All right, thanks, everybody.